Hello everyone, let's discuss today's The Hindu editorial page. The first article is An Uphill Struggle to Grow the Forest Rights Act. In this article, the writer says that on December 18, 2006, the Rajya Sabha endorsed the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Forest Rights Act, also known as the Forest Rights Act, FRA, enacted by the Lok Sabha. The FRA aimed to end the long-standing conflict over forest encroachments and create a more democratic bottom-up forest governance. However, the implementation of the FRA has been plagued by political opportunism, forester resistance, bureaucratic apathy, and the discourse surrounded by deliberate canards and misconceptions. Previously, local communities enjoyed customary rights over forests in their vicinity or even a large region. Even when kings or chieftains claimed hunting rights in certain forests, local communities continued to enjoy all other forest benefits. However, the colonial takeover of India's forests resulted in a massive disruption of these traditions. Based on the false idea of eminent domain, the 1878 Indian Forest Act was passed, leading to the takeover of India's forests. The Imperial Forest Department was established to harvest and transform forests to maximize timber and revenue, and was also tasked with protecting state property against local communities, now deemed trespassers. The injustices imposed by this colonial forest policy took multiple forms. First, shifting cultivation was banned, and the survey and settlement of agricultural lands was incomplete and biased in favor of the state. Forest villages were created to ensure labor for forestry operations, where forest land was leased for agriculture to mostly Adivasi households in return for compulsory, virtually bonded labor. Access to forest produce was limited, temporary, and chargeable, and always at the mercy of the forest bureaucracy armed with police powers. Any concessions to local livelihood needs were termed privileges that could be modified or withdrawn any time. Fifth, even where access was permitted, the local community had no right to manage the forest, as the state logged valuable forests and made heavily used forests de facto open access. Post-independence, matters worsened, with states and zamindari estates declaring their forest areas as state property without proper inquiry into who was residing in them. Legitimate residents and cultivators became encroachers overnight. Forest lands were later leased out under the Grow More Food campaign and other initiatives to meet the needs of a growing population, but were never regularized. Communities displaced by dams were not given alternative lands and ended up encroaching forest land elsewhere. Forest exploitation continued as in colonial times, but in the name of national interest. The Wildlife Protection Act 1972 and the Forest Conservation Act 1980, FCA, both conceived within the framework of eminent domain, became the most significant legislation in India's history. In conclusion, the FRA has been a significant step in democratizing forest governance and freeing forest dwellers from historical injustices. However, the implementation of the FRA has been plagued by political opportunism, forester resistance, bureaucratic apathy, and misconceptions surrounding the FRA's goals. The next article is The Stormy Red Sea, the complexities of global events. In this article, the writer says that in October, the Yemen-based and Iran-aligned Houthi militia announced its intention to join the war to support the people of Gaza. This brought the critical waterways of the Red Sea, which connects the Suez Canal, into the middle of the conflict. The Suez Canal carries nearly 15% of all global trade between the West and the East. In mid-November, the Houthis released a video of armed men in a helicopter riding a cargo vessel with Israeli links, traveling through the Red Sea towards India. The Strait of Hormuz, on the other side of the region, is seen as a major geopolitical choke point, while the Red Sea is increasingly being seen as an alternative. Saudi Arabia's new futuristic city of Neom, a pet project of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, represents the rapidly changing face of the kingdom. The United States has been at the forefront of deploying military capacity to counter threats in the form of drones, missiles, and direct operations by the group's military commander. The US has called upon partners to deploy a multinational task force around the narrow Bab al-Mandab Strait between Yemen, Djibouti, and Eritrea. The Houthis have shown an eclectic mix of military capability, including torpedoes and missiles with up to 1,000 kilometers range capability. As of 2022, the Houthis are known to have acquired 8 different types of missiles into their arsenal, compared to just 3 previous ones, which had less than 50 kilometers range and were acquired in the 1990s. Riyadh has called for restraint by Washington, D.C. in taking any military action directly against the Houthis. With the Saudis having launched a war against the Houthis in Yemen in 2015, the kingdom is now holding talks with the group's leadership on the back of the Saudi-Iran détente brokered earlier this year. Depletion of security in the Red Sea will have a global impact, particularly for Asian economies such as India, Japan, South Korea, and China, drawing in their interests. The next article is A Cloudy Horizon. Latest trade data underscore the criticality of competitiveness. In this article, the writer says that India's goods exports fell by 2.8% in October, reaching $33.9 billion. Imports dropped by 4.33% to $54.5 billion, cooling the merchandise trade deficit to $20.6 billion, almost a third below October's record high. The decline in imports was sharp, despite the Commerce Ministry lowering October's import bill by $1.6 billion from the initial estimate of $65. Economists expect the deficit to stay range-bound between $20 billion and $25 billion through the remaining 4 months of the year. August's goods trade deficit was moderated by nearly $3 billion, with an overall export-import total seeing returns of $5 billion. The magnitude of upward revision in the monthly merchandise trade deficit has averaged around $1.5 billion since July, compared to an average of $0.5 billion in the first quarter of 2023 to 24. To compete with rivals, India needs to do more to reduce logistics costs and infrastructure spending. A government-commissioned study indicates that they dropped slightly over the past decade. Reducing petroleum prices for users, in tandem with global trends, would boost competitiveness far more effectively. The government must get a better grip on the data it bases its decisions on to avoid repeating the obvious.